Hey guys, tonight we wake up somewhere unexpected. You blink slowly, your eyelids still sticky with sleep, and find yourself not in your cozy bed, but on a thin, lumpy straw mattress inside a dim stone room. The walls are rough, the floor is dirt, and there's an unmistakable scent of damp cloth, smoke, and something vaguely animal. You shift, only to realize the blanket scratching your skin isn't fabric at all. It's an old woolen tunic, full of holes and harboring at least one live insect. Welcome to ancient Rome. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and if you're listening from a villa in Tuscany or your car in Kansas. Drop your location and the local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The morning air is sharp with smoke and sewage. You sit up groggily, scratching your scalp, and realize there's no pillow, no privacy, and no promise of breakfast. A rat scurries along the rafters, tail flicking like a metronome. You shiver a little, not from cold, but from the overwhelming realization you are now a plebeian. A working-class Roman with no title, no servants, and no idea what's about to hit you. You reach for your clothes, which aren't neatly folded, but hanging from a nail near the fire pit. Your tunic is coarse and smells like yesterday's sweat mixed with, let's just call it, earthy undertones. As you pull it over your head, the fabric scratches like a woolen cheese grater. Romans didn't believe in soft textiles for the common folk. Linen, silk, those are for senators and their spoiled poodles. Your feet slide into leather sandals, thin strips bound crudely with rope, and you immediately step on a pebble. It's going to be a long day. Outside, the insula your apartment building is alive with sounds. A woman yelling at her child in Latin. A goat bleeding from the floor below. Somewhere, a merchant is already shouting prices for barley and leeks. You cough. The air is smoky because your neighbor just started a fire for porridge, and there's no chimney. Romans didn't do chimneys. The smoke just goes somewhere. Usually your room. You head toward the street, ducking under laundry lines and stepping over puddles of mysterious origin. As you reach the door, a neighbor shuffles past and mumbles a groggy salve. They smell like stale wine and anxiety. You push open the heavy wooden door and step outside, and the world hits you like a chariot. The smell is intense. Open sewage lines run along the street edges, bubbling with who knows what. Historians still argue whether Rome had an effective public sanitation system. Technically, yes. But let's just say you wouldn't want to drop your keys down there. You turn left and narrowly avoid a donkey cart barreling past at full speed. The driver shouts something that sounds like an insult, but you can't quite tell. Latin, it turns out, is less like poetry and more like aggressive honking. You hear the clang of iron against wood, the bleating of more goats, and a man yelling about fresh olives. This is your neighborhood dense, loud, and bustling by dawn. Sleep in, and you'll miss your only chance to fetch clean water from the public fountain before someone drops a dead pigeon in it again. It's happened. Twice, you shuffle your way to the fountain, where the line is already forming. A boy is bathing his feet in the basin. You sigh. Potable water wasn't exactly sacred to the Romans. Technically, they had aqueducts, an engineering marvel, but once the water hits ground level, it's a free-for-all. Drink fast, and maybe don't look too hard at the floaties. Your stomach growls, but there's no time for breakfast. You're expected to work soon, and food will have to wait. You rub your eyes, wondering how people survived this every single day. Oh, and just a heads up, coffee doesn't exist. Romans believed energy came from barley soup and sheer stubbornness. Good luck. One more thing before you move on. As you pass a vendor selling dubious figs and sticky honey cakes, you notice something odd. A man walking backward, tossing salt over his shoulder. Superstition runs deep here. Romans feared omens, black dogs, sneezes, the wrong sandal on the wrong foot. You're not just navigating a city. You're tiptoeing through a minefield of ritual paranoia. So, there you are, itchy tunic, bruised feet, hungry belly, and all. Daylight is rising fast, and Rome is already 2 steps ahead of you. You haven't even made it to the bathhouse yet. But don't worry. Things are about to get much weirder. You shuffle down a side street, following a stream of half-awake Romans toward what you hope is relief. The famed public bathhouse. You've heard tales, marble columns, steamy pools, elegant mosaics of dolphins and gods. It sounds luxurious. You imagine sinking into warm water, letting the stress of the city melt away. Maybe a little herbal oil massage for good measure. Yeah, no. As you push open the creaky wooden door, you're immediately hit with a wall of heat, shouting, and something suspiciously similar to boiled cabbage. The bathhouse is not serene. It's not even remotely quiet. It's a full-on Roman block party, except everyone is mostly naked, loudly opinionated, and very, very slippery. You try to navigate the changing area, where men are squabbling over lost sandals and arguing about chariot races. You spot a guy vigorously scrubbing his armpits with a dull bronze scraper, the infamous strigil. Soap, not really a thing. Instead, they slather themselves in oil, exercise until sweaty, and then scrape the whole mess off. It's a routine historians call cleansing, though anyone with a nose might disagree. You disrobe awkwardly, trying not to make eye contact, and clutch your belongings in a bundle. There's no locker. Just hope no one walks off with your only tunic. That happened to a guy last week. He had to walk home in a barrel. You step cautiously onto the slick stone floor, and your foot shoots out like a startled eel. You flail, catch yourself, and nearly fall into the cold pool. No signs, no lifeguards, just vibes. Romans didn't have OSHA. If you fall and crack your skull, well, someone might write a sad poem about you. You inch toward the tepidarium, the warm room, hoping for relaxation. Instead, it's packed tighter than a grain shipment. You find a space beside a man with very pointy elbows and a wild-eyed storyteller who seems to be narrating his entire breakfast. You nod politely, trying not to inhale too deeply. Someone nearby is wearing an oil made from myrrh and possibly old goat. You think you're sweating from the steam, but it might just be your nerves. The walls are decorated with elaborate frescoes of half-naked gods doing scandalous things with nymphs and wine. They're beautiful, sure, but a little hard to enjoy when a stranger is exfoliating behind you with volcanic pumice. Eventually, someone motions you toward the caldarium, the hot room. You shuffle in, and the air smacks you like a roasted chicken. It's over 100 degrees Fahrenheit, with no airflow. Your sinuses immediately melt. The tiles burn your soles. You perch awkwardly on a stone bench and pretend this is nice. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely enjoyed the caldarium or just used it as a competitive sweating arena. Judging by the man next to you humming while dripping like a roast pig, it might be both. Suddenly, a boy comes around offering something in a small dish. You're excited. Is it soap? A scrub? No, it's a mix of crushed herbs and sand. He gestures to your arm, and before you can protest, he's exfoliating like he's chipping away marble. Your skin will never recover. A quick rinse from a bucket of cold water shocks you back into the present. It's over. You've bathed, you think. You feel both cleaner and somehow dirtier. But you survived the ritual. Now it's time to dry off. But towels aren't plush Egyptian cotton. They're thin linen rags that barely absorb anything. You smear the water around your limbs and squelch back into your tunic, now sticking to your damp skin like old wallpaper. You feel like a wilted salad. As you exit the bathhouse, squinting into the sunlight, you spot someone applying a thick paste to their face. Is that sunscreen? Sort of. It's made from crocodile dung and chalk, believed to ward off wrinkles and evil spirits. 2 birds, 1 weird smear. You breathe in deeply, catching a whiff of sulfur, smoke, and wet leather. The bathhouse was supposed to refresh you. Instead, you've just marinated in the soup of Rome's humanity. Still, be grateful. You weren't mugged. No one stole your strigil. And you only slipped once. That's considered a pretty good Roman spa day. You've barely dried off from the bathhouse ordeal, and already another pressing matter rises, quite literally, from your gut. Nature calls. Now, in your own time, you're used to a certain level of dignity. A flush, a lock on the door, maybe a scented candle. But in ancient Rome, those comforts are as mythical as unicorns. Here, relieving yourself is a communal sport. You shuffle your way toward the public latriny, a stone structure tucked just off the street behind a row of bakeries and questionable shrines. The entrance has no door, only a curtain fluttering weakly in the breeze, because privacy, you'll learn, is an optional extra in this empire. Inside, it's dim, damp, and echoey. A semicircle of stone benches lines the wall, each one featuring a neat oval cutout. Beneath the seats runs a shallow water channel, meant to carry waste away to the nearest sewer, or at least downhill, in theory. You glance around. Several Romans are already seated, chatting idly while doing their business. One man reads a wax tablet. Another is telling a joke that ends in the Latin equivalent of a fart pun. Nobody looks embarrassed because this is normal. Toileting in Rome is social. You lower yourself onto the cold, hard stone, trying not to flinch. There's no toilet paper. Instead, at your feet is a communal stick with a sea sponge attached to the end. It rests in a bucket of vinegar water. You're supposed to yes, exactly that. You reach for it tentatively, and your brain momentarily shuts down. You try not to think about the dozens, hundreds, who have done the same. Historians still argue whether wealthier Romans brought their own sponge, or simply trusted in the vinegar's antiseptic magic. You, sadly, have no monogrammed hygiene stick. A rat scuttles near the water trench, and you pull your feet up instinctively. A beetle crawls across the stone. You wonder for a moment if the Colosseum lions had it easier. Once finished, there's no sink, just another sponge rinse and a shake of your hands. You make a mental note not to touch anything or anyone for the rest of the day. Outside, you breathe deeply, trying to reset. But the smell lingers, not just on you, but in the air itself. The Romans had the cloaca maxima, one of the earliest sewage systems, but it wasn't perfect. Waste disposal often involved throwing it out the window with a shouted warning, "Guard loo." In its Roman form, which was probably just cave, before someone's tunic got an unfortunate new pattern, you pass a sign for another facility, the vomitorium. You've probably heard this term before, assuming it meant a designated room for ancient feasting purge parties. Turns out, that's a myth. A vomitorium is actually just a passageway in an amphitheater to allow crowds to exit quickly. Still, considering how your stomach feels right now, you kind of wish the mythical version were real. As you walk on, clenching every muscle that might have touched the sponge, a street performer juggles clay pots while singing a bawdy tune. You want to smile, but your insides are still recovering from the trauma. Maybe a quiet alley would help you regroup. Instead, you step straight into a fresh pile of donkey droppings. Rome is filled with marvels, yes, but also with freely roaming livestock. Your sandal squelches, and you sigh. In a way, the universe has gently reminded you you're not in Kansas anymore. You scrape your shoe against a curbstone that's seen too much. Around you, people continue with their lives. A fishmonger tosses wriggling eels onto a slab. A slave washes blood from a butcher's doorway. A child tries to steal a fig and is promptly cuffed by an old woman wielding a broom made of reeds. This is daily life. Normal. You, on the other hand, are clinging to the memory of indoor plumbing and aloe-scented wet wipes, like a shipwreck survivor to driftwood. You turn a corner, hoping for distraction, and nearly collide with a street vendor selling tiny perfume bottles. He waves one under your nose. The scent, lavender and sulfur. You buy it anyway, dabbing some on your wrists like a Roman influencer. It helps, a little. You sit on a low wall and look up at the rooftops, terracotta tiles silhouetted against a hazy sky. Smoke from hearth fires coils lazily in the air. In the distance, someone is playing a reed flute. And you realize this city, despite its smells and sponges, is very much alive. Still, you might never recover from that toilet. Your stomach grumbles again, louder this time. A low, echoing reminder that bathing, scraping, and sponge trauma can't fuel you forever. It's time to hunt for breakfast. Except here in ancient Rome, breakfast is not a grand affair. There's no warm stack of pancakes. No eggs, no bacon, not even a sad banana. The Romans call it intaculum, a morning bite that's less about indulgence and more about survival. You stroll toward the local taberna, hoping to find something edible. A smoky little stall near the forum offers the usual: yesterday's bread, a wedge of cheese, and maybe, if the gods are feeling generous, a bruised fig. The bread is hard, like weapon-grade hard. You try to bite it and immediately regret every dental decision you've ever made. You dunk it into watered-down wine, the Roman version of milk and cereal, and chew slowly, like you're gnawing through history itself. This isn't breakfast. This is dental warfare. The cheese isn't much better. It crumbles in your fingers and smells like regret. Still, you're grateful. Last week, someone found a weevil the size of a coin inside theirs. That's protein, technically. Historians still argue whether Romans regularly tolerated pests in their food, or if vendors were just creatively dishonest. You wash it down with pasca, a drink made by mixing sour wine with water and herbs. It's what soldiers drank. Tart, vinegary, and surprisingly refreshing if you pretend it's kombucha and you're on a cleanse. A man next to you is eating a boiled egg dipped in fish sauce garum. Now, garum deserves its own warning label. It's made by fermenting fish guts in the sun for months, until it turns into a salty, oily sludge. Then it's bottled and poured generously over everything. To Romans, it's the nectar of the gods. To you, it smells like betrayal. You look down at your crust, now soft with wine. It has a faint gray-green tinge. Mold, probably. You sniff it and decide you've eaten worse in college. One bite, too. The texture is dense, the taste like something forgotten in a pantry. Then you spot it. A merchant on the corner selling honey cakes. Now we're talking. Sweet, sticky, golden discs of barley flour, fried in oil and drenched in honey. You hand over a few coins and take a bite. It's warm, crisp-edged, and finally, a moment of joy. You close your eyes. For 5 seconds, you forget the sponge, the donkey droppings, and the man gargling garum. This is bliss, but it doesn't last. A child barrels into you, knocking your cake into the dirt. You both stare at it mournfully. He grabs the rest and runs. You sigh. Breakfast was nice while it lasted. You wander a bit more, weaving through carts loaded with grain, fruit, and amphorae of oil. One vendor shouts about pickled cabbage, another about smoked mice on sticks. Yes, that's real. A crunchy delicacy, apparently. There's a group of men clustered around a stall, animated and loud. You peek over their shoulders. They're playing a game of dice, wagering coins, sandals, and even a chicken. Gambling was technically frowned upon, but everyone did it, including the senators, including the priests, possibly including the emperor. One man rolls and curses, another laughs and slaps his back. The loser kicks over a jar of olives. A small dog bolts away with one in its mouth. You smile despite yourself. Rome may be filthy and chaotic, but it's got character. You turn down another alley and find an old woman selling dried fruit and almonds. She nods at you, eyes twinkling beneath a heavy unibrow. You buy a handful of dates, sticky and sweet. Much better. And then, because it's Rome and nothing is ever simple, a funeral procession blocks the street. A small band plays mournful pipes, while family members cry very loudly, possibly for show. Mourners were often hired, paid to wail convincingly. The body is carried in a carved wooden litter, arms crossed, coins on the eyes for Karen. A priest flicks incense, and someone in the crowd sneezes dramatically. You step back, dates forgotten, and give the procession space. It's a solemn moment, but also oddly theatrical. Rome doesn't do subtle. After it passes, you return to the street, heart a little heavier. Life is short here. Food is basic. Death is public. You wonder how anyone survives this city on just stale bread and vinegar wine. And yet, somehow, they do. You crunch the last almond and wipe your fingers on your tunic. The day's just getting started, and you've got a job to find, or someone's going to think you're a vagrant and toss you in the Tiber. You wander down a narrow side street, weaving between clay pots, limping dogs, and two men arguing over cabbage weights. The sun has climbed a little higher now, casting long slats of light between crumbling brick walls. Your stomach is somewhat satisfied, if skeptical, and it's time to figure out what a Roman plebeian like you actually does all day. Work, it turns out, is not a glamorous affair. There are no emails, no swivel chairs, and definitely no coffee breaks. If you're lucky, you've already been apprenticed to a craftsperson, maybe a potter, cobbler, or builder. If you're not, well, let's just say your job title involves hauling things and sweating a lot. You pass a small officina, a smithy, where the clang of hammer on bronze rings out like a dull headache. Inside, a young boy is stoking the furnace, while an older man in a singed tunic pounds out nails. You catch a glance from the apprentice and see his face is already streaked with soot, and it's not even mid-morning. Just down the way, A baker is pulling charred loaves from a domed brick oven. His face glistens, his arms are flour-caked, and his mood is somewhere between resigned and mildly homicidal. You offer a polite nod. He scowls in flour-dusted Latin. In ancient Rome, work begins early and ends only when the sun threatens to vanish. You, being new here, get assigned a less skilled role, carrying amphorae of olive oil from one warehouse to another. These clay containers are heavier than they look, slick with residue, and shaped in the most awkward, shoulder-pinching way possible. You heave one up, wobble like a drunken stork, and begin your slow shuffle down the street. You pass beneath laundry lines, low archways, and one very aggressive goose who seems to think you're trespassing. Your arms ache, your back twinges. You wonder how many Roman chiropractors existed. Spoiler, 0. Instead, they recommended vinegar rubs and prayer. You try to focus on your surroundings. The ground is uneven, made of large stone slabs with gaps that could swallow a sandal hole. Carts rattle by, their wheels squeaking like rusty birds. A procession of priests in feathered caps pass you without breaking stride. One of them is holding a sacred chicken. You don't ask. Historians still argue whether the average Roman laborer had designated work hours or just collapsed when their legs gave out. Judging by the sweat already pouring down your neck, you're betting on the latter. You pass a construction site where men are mixing lime mortar by hand. One is balanced precariously on scaffolding made from rope and hope. He waves at you with a trowel. You try to wave back, but nearly drop your amphora. It lands with a terrifying clink, but doesn't break. The gods are clearly watching. A supervisor caput operis, or head of the work, marches past, barking instructions. His toga is spotless, which seems unfair. He points at your posture and mutters something about weak shoulders. You consider telling him you're actually from the 21st century, but decide to just nod and look busy. Midday comes, and with it, a slight break. Workers gather in the shade of a crumbling column, chewing olives and breaking open loaves of grainy, sad bread. You sit with them, your legs trembling like reeds. Someone passes you a handful of roasted chickpeas. They're warm, crunchy, and taste faintly of dust and triumph. Conversation turns to local gossip, a new tax, a gladiator scandal, a senator caught wearing Greek sandals. Shocking. You nod along, trying to keep up. Latin is fast, slang-filled, and spoken with the urgency of people who don't trust tomorrow. Then comes the inevitable, the return to labor. You lift a second amphora, your arms already plotting revenge, and shuffle back toward the warehouse. On the way, you pass a man selling amulets for protection against back pain. You consider it. At one point, a group of wealthy youths on horseback gallop past, kicking up dust and not even looking down. One of them laughs loudly. His tunic is embroidered. His sandals are new. You cough in the cloud they leave behind and mutter something that might translate to trust fund baby. As you finally drop off your cargo and wipe your brow on your tunic, you realize something deeply Roman. Survival here isn't about thriving. It's about enduring. You don't win the day, you just outlast it. A bell rings somewhere in the distance, signaling a temple ritual, or perhaps just the hour. Your muscles throb. Your sandals are soaked. You are, by all definitions, now a functioning part of Roman society. Congratulations. Now, try not to collapse before dinner. You stumble out of the warehouse, arms jelly-like and spirit gently leaking from your ears. Rome, it turns out, is not interested in your comfort. The sun is climbing down now, painting the dusty walls in amber and rust. But the city isn't quieting. It's just warming up for its second act. You head toward the main street, or via, thinking you might enjoy a peaceful stroll. What you get instead is an obstacle course of chaos. Let's start with the traffic. Romans didn't invent sidewalks as much as they invented tripping hazards. The streets are narrow, cobbled, and filled with everyone from fast-moving donkey carts to groups of toga wearers who insist on walking shoulder to shoulder like they own the empire. A fish vendor is yelling about his discounted eels, which flop miserably in a wooden tub. A runaway goose careens past your ankles. Someone drops a chamber pot out of a second-story window, thankfully missing you, but only by divine intervention. You press on, dodging puddles of mysterious liquid. Rain. Unlikely. Rome hasn't seen rain in weeks. More likely, it's something that fell from a butcher's stall. Or worse, a bathhouse runoff channel. You sidestep, miss, and now your sandal squelches with every step. A pickpocket brushes past you. You pat your side. Still got your coin purse. Barely. You turn and spot the culprit blending back into the crowd, smooth as a seasoned actor. Pickpocketing in Rome is an art form, and you're the gallery. Up ahead, 2 carts have collided. The drivers are locked in a shouting match that escalates rapidly to a stick-waving contest. One blames the other's donkey. The donkey seems deeply unbothered. A crowd gathers. Bets are placed. This is better than theater. You slip around them and nearly trip over a man selling roasted chestnuts from a brazier. He shouts something about your mother. You don't catch the details, but based on his tone, it wasn't a compliment. The air is thick, part smoke, part perfume, part hot bread, and part, well, Rome's signature scent. Open sewer stew, the cloaca maxima, might be one of the marvels of Roman engineering. But let's just say it's not flawless. Rome's sewage flows through open gutters on either side of the street, which means every step is a gamble, and every gust of wind a warning. You pass an alley where a group of children are throwing dice and chasing each other with sticks. One stops to scowl at you, then throws a grape. It hits your knee with more force than expected. You salute them and move along. Childhood hasn't changed much. Suddenly, you're nearly flattened by a delivery cart speeding through. The driver shouts, "Exit via," get out of the way, and you dive to the side just in time to avoid becoming ancient roadkill. Historians still argue whether there were official speed limits in Rome. Judging by that cart's velocity, the answer is, no. You duck into a side street, hoping for quiet. Instead, you find a street performer balancing a clay jug on his head while reciting lines from Virgil. His audience includes two elderly women, a dog, and a man asleep against a barrel. You watch for a moment, genuinely impressed, until the jug crashes to the ground and the man bows dramatically. Everyone claps. The dog howls. You're getting used to this, the relentless pace, the unpredictability, the sheer density of life. Every corner holds another sensory ambush. Incense wafts from a temple. Metal clangs from a forge. A woman screams at a man holding a broken amphora like it's the end of the world. Which, in that marriage, it might be. You pause on a stone step, watching a painted cart roll by with a puppet show in full swing. The puppets are crude and slightly terrifying, but the kids laugh with delight. A storyteller narrates loudly a tale of a cunning servant, a foolish senator, and a dancing goat. It's the Roman version of sitcom humor, and it lands. As you stand to leave, someone tries to sell you a genuine relic from the temple of Jupiter. It looks suspiciously like a chipped brick. You politely decline. He throws in a clay amulet to ward off fleas. You consider it. You rejoin the main road as twilight begins to settle. Lamps are being lit, oil wicks floating in bronze bowls. Their glow casts long shadows against the walls. The city starts to shimmer, not with silence, but with a different rhythm. Less urgent, more theatrical. You pass a brothel, clearly marked by the painting of a sandal and a rather suggestive fig. A client staggers out, belt loose, tunic askew, humming a tune you instantly wish you hadn't heard. As you cross a worn footbridge, a gust of warm wind hits you. It smells like smoke, sweat, fried onions, and possibility. You realize the street is a stage, and Rome never takes intermission, and you're just trying not to trip on your own sandal again. You duck into a quieter alley, seeking refuge from the sensory onslaught, when bam, you stub your toe. Hard, on a cobblestone that's been sticking out for what looks like the past several centuries. You yelp, because even in ancient Rome, pinky toes are fragile. You limp to a wall and sit, cradling your foot, and realize you might actually need help. In your time, this would be a job for urgent care, or at least some ice and ibuprofen. But in ancient Rome, welcome to the fascinating and slightly horrifying world of Roman medicine. You hobble toward a small medicus shop marked with a carved symbol of a snake coiled around a staff. Promising, right? Inside, the air smells of vinegar, thyme, and something metallic. An elderly man with wispy gray curls and eyebrows, like feather dusters, greets you with an enthusiastic salve and gestures to a wooden stool that looks suspiciously like it's doubled as a butcher's block. You sit carefully and show him your toe. He examines it, muttering something about imbalance of humors, which sounds like he's critiquing a bad stand-up act. He reaches for a bowl of crushed herbs mixed with goose fat and smears it generously across your skin. It's cold, sticky, and smells like ancient regret. Then, to top it off, he places a small bronze charm around your ankle, mumbles a chant involving Apollo, and tells you to walk with intent. You nod, trying to look grateful. He charges you 3 asses, then throws in a bonus, a dried mouse tail, to ward off further injury. Historians still argue whether Romans genuinely believed in such magical cures, or if healers simply loved dramatic flair. Outside, your toe still throbs, but at least it now smells like rosemary. You limp on, marveling at the fact that medicine here is a confusing blend of science, superstition, and sheer guesswork. Want a cure for a headache? Try tying a weasel tooth to your forehead. Got indigestion? Swallow powdered emeralds. And for serious wounds, there's always leeches. You pass another Medica stall, this one advertising eye-clearing salve made from crushed oyster shells and pig lard. You politely keep walking. Further along the street, you spot what looks like a pharmacy, a medicamentum shop with shelves of dried herbs, ceramic jars, and a large mortar and pestle. The shopkeeper beams at you and offers something for mental clarity. You accept a small vial of thick green syrup and take a sip. It tastes like basil, vinegar, and something faintly electrical. Your eye twitches. You're not sure if that's good or bad. You pass a shrine to Asclepius, the Roman god of healing. People have left offerings, figs, coins, tiny wax models of body parts needing attention. There's a small foot, an ear, even a miniature buttock. You consider leaving your mouse tail, but decide it might be impolite. At a nearby fountain, a man is selling amulets that supposedly prevent plague. They're shaped like tiny hammers. You ask why. He says it's because plague fears getting hit. Fair enough. Your toe is still sore, but you've noticed something. No one's panicking. People lose teeth, get scratched by stray cats, fall off carts, and they just keep going. Life expectancy in Rome wasn't high, and most folks accepted that health was a fragile, finicky thing. You got sick. You visited the temple, drank some herbal tea, and hoped for the best. Children run past, their knees scraped and feet bare. An old woman leans on a cane made from twisted laurel. She sees you wincing and mutters, "Rub it with garlic and wine." You thank her. Somehow, that sounds more effective than the mouse tail. As night falls, the city grows hazier. The smells more layered, baking bread, roasting meat, soot, and lavender-scented burial wax from a nearby undertaker's stand. You pause to rest on a low stone ledge, flexing your bandaged toe, which is now wrapped in cloth printed with stars and grapes. The medicus insisted it channels Jupiter. You realize you're incredibly lucky. Your injury was minor. You didn't need surgery. Because in ancient Rome, surgery meant no anesthesia, just strong wine, a stick to bite, and a very sharp knife or bone saw. As you rest, you overhear two men debating whether diseases come from swamp vapors or angry gods. One suggests that sneezing is the body's way of expelling evil spirits. The other says it's just what happens when you sniff pepper. They agree to disagree. You chuckle quietly and lean back, letting the cool stone soothe your aching muscles. Rome may be brilliant and brutal, but it's also beautifully bizarre. And somehow, despite the lack of antibiotics, hand sanitizer, or even basic band-aids, its people press on. You're pressing on too, limping slightly, but still standing. You're walking again gingerly, thanks to your bandaged toe when the scent hits you. Roasted meat, honey, cloves, and something else, something fishy, but in an expensive kind of way. Your nose leads you toward a grand domus, a private home with towering marble columns, and a bronze door knocker shaped like a lion. Inside, a dinner party is underway. You're not on the guest list. You are very much a plebeian, but let's imagine, just for tonight, that you're sneaking a peek into the world of Rome's upper crust. Because if you think your stale bread and vinegar breakfast was tough, wait until you see what the rich consider a meal. The cena, or Roman dinner, is a drawn-out social performance. It starts in the late afternoon and stretches well into the night. The wealthier the host, the longer and more elaborate the affair. Think of it as an edible status update, every course a flex. Inside the atrium, wealthy guests recline on couches arranged in a U-shape around a low table. Reclining while eating is the done thing. Sitting upright, practically barbaric, you watch one particularly well-oiled man adjust his toga as a slave fans him with peacock feathers. You, meanwhile, are sweating through your third-hand tunic and trying to stay unnoticed behind a potted fig. The first course arrives, gustaccio, or appetizers. There are olives stuffed with herbs, boiled artichokes, and honey-glazed dormice. Yes, dormice. Tiny, roasted rodents served on beds of lentils, with little toothpicks for dainty chewing. Historians still argue whether the rich actually enjoyed dormice, or just liked grossing out their guests. Next comes the prima mensa, or main course. A whole peacock, dyed blue and reassembled with its feathers intact, is paraded out like a celebrity. There's roast boar stuffed with figs, and a dish of fish cooked in, you guessed it, garum. The smell is assertive. You notice the diners aren't exactly subtle. They belch between courses, a sign of appreciation. One man snaps his fingers for wine. A woman claps twice for more honeyed dates. Slaves move quickly and silently, refilling goblets, brushing crumbs off togas, and occasionally mopping up spilled sauce with what looks like more bread. You peek at the host, a man with 3 rings on each finger and a laugh like a falling amphora. He's telling a story about a senator who slipped on an eel and fractured his dignity. Everyone laughs politely, including a man wearing eyeliner and an enormous gold fibula pin that could double as a weapon. The third course, secunda mensa is dessert. Baked pears, honey cakes, nuts, and dates stuffed with almonds. You drool a little, then pretend you didn't. A platter of snow imported from the mountains, yes, actual snow, is served with fruit syrup. Meanwhile, you remember chewing moldy bread this morning and wonder if you've made a series of poor choices. One guest is drunk enough to attempt a recitation of Virgil. He slurs a line about Aeneas and then spills wine on his toga. No one minds. The host applauds. It's all part of the spectacle. A slave walks past carrying a platter of jellied fish molded into the shape of a cupid. You begin to suspect Romans just cooked things based on how strange they could make them look. You manage to swipe a leftover honey cake from an unattended tray and sneak a bite. It's perfect. Warm, soft, sticky with spiced syrup. You sigh so deeply, you almost give away your hiding spot. But the evening isn't done. Now come the entertainments. A troupe of acrobats enters, flipping through the atrium in sequined tunics. A woman plays the lyre, while a poet recites bawdy verses involving Hercules and too much wine. A dwarf juggles coins, then drops them all and shrugs. The guests roar with laughter. This isn't just dinner. It's performance, indulgence, theater, and social maneuvering. Seating order, toasting order, even who gets which cup, it all reflects your place in Rome's social ladder. You hear murmurs of political gossip. Someone's wife was caught sneaking out of the baths. Someone else's son was seen wearing Greek robes. Scandalous. You wonder how anyone keeps track of all these rules. But then again, that's the point. If you have to ask, you don't belong. Eventually, the host stands and offers a final toast. The guests cheer, some already halfway to unconsciousness. Slaves begin clearing dishes, dabbing chins, and leading the truly drunk toward couches where they can nap off their indulgences. You slip away, the stolen honey cake tucked neatly in your memory. As the door closes behind you, the city feels cooler, quieter, and just a little more unjust. Because while you'll be chewing on lentils tomorrow, the man inside will be planning another feast, complete with dyed geese, harp music, and probably another startled dormouse. You leave the senator's dinner party behind, slightly sticky with honey, deeply hungry for justice, and now fully aware that in Rome, not even dessert is safe from excess. The streets are quieter now, cloaked in the soft orange glow of oil lamps set into wall niches. You exhale, thinking maybe, just maybe, you'll enjoy a peaceful evening. And then your tunic starts falling off. Turns out, Roman fashion is not built for speed or comfort, or really, movement of any kind. You've tried to embrace it, wrapping your body in a proper tunic and tying it off with a rope belt. But that's just the beginning. Tonight, you've been given a toga to wear because your work supervisor insists you must look respectable at a client meeting tomorrow morning. You figured you'd practice. It's a disaster. The toga is a massive, heavy wool sheet about 20 feet long, and it's supposed to be artfully draped around your body with no pins, no clips, and no Velcro. Just folds and hope. You've tried wrapping it. You've tried looping it, but you keep ending up looking like a drunken burrito. It slides off one shoulder. It strangles your left arm. You trip over the hem. Frankly, the toga seems less like a garment and more like a test from the gods. Historians still argue whether the average Roman actually wore togas regularly, or if it was more ceremonial than everyday attire. Judging by your current suffering, you're voting for once a year, under protest. You eventually settle on a vaguely passable drape and step back outside, where the cool night breeze immediately flaps your toga open like a ship's sail. A group of children points and giggles. One of them helpfully yells, "You look like a collapsed tent." You bow. You tug it back in place, then curse softly when your sandal strap snaps. Now you're limping and unraveling. You reach down to tie the sandal, but the toga sleeve falls into a puddle. Of course. You find a market stall selling replacement sandals, and the merchant offers you two choices: the common man's leather or imported Egyptian luxury. You pick the former because you like your kidneys and don't want to sell one. As he laces them on your feet, you ask, "Aren't sandals uncomfortable for walking all day?" He shrugs. "Only when you're alive." Comfort wasn't exactly high on the Roman fashion priority list. Beauty, symbolism, and clear social signaling. Yes. Arch support, not so much. You pass a young noblewoman, adjusting her intricate hairdo with the help of two slaves and a small bronze mirror. Her hair is curled, pinned, and stacked so high you wonder if birds are living in it. Hair fashion was a status symbol here. Wealthier women often wore wigs made from Germanic hair, collected after let's just say the donors didn't get royalties. Meanwhile, your own hair is sweaty, flat, and covered in toga lint. You consider starting a new trend. As you shuffle onward, you pass a clothing vendor arranging bolts of dyed cloth, bright purples, and deep reds. These shades are expensive, drawn from rare sea snails and boiled repeatedly to extract their color. A single purple stripe on a senator's toga announces, "Don't speak to me unless you own land." You think back to your wardrobe back home: soft cotton shirts, elastic waistbands, hoodies with zippers. The Roman world has none of these treasures. The closest thing to pajamas is, well, nothing. Romans often slept in the nude, or just reused their tunic if it wasn't too crusty. You attempt a short jog to cross the street before a cart barrels past, but your toga rebels. It wraps around your knees and brings you down like a woolen anaconda. You land hard on your elbow. A passing baker winces. "First time?" he asks. You nod from the ground. Eventually, you give up. You march back home, shedding the toga in sections like a snake molting in reverse. You carry the rest in your arms like laundry and vow never to wear it again unless someone's being buried or crowned inside your insula. You toss the toga onto the bed, collapse beside it, and stare at the flickering lamp on the wall. The flame dances gently, casting soft shadows that make your tiny room feel almost timeless. You wonder how the Romans managed it. These tangled robes, these sandals with no padding, these social cues woven into every stitch. And then you remember, they didn't manage it. They just accepted it. They didn't have leggings or hoodies to miss. This was normal. For them, your idea of fashion, zippers, socks, t-shirts, would be the weirdest thing they could imagine. Well, that and shampoo. You pull your blanket tight, careful not to think about the lice, and whisper a silent thank you to the future. You wake up sore. Not in the oops, I slept funny way, but in the I was steam cooked in a wool wrap and stomped by time travel kind of way. Your elbow throbs where you took that toga tumble, and your toe, still bandaged, still mildly offended, lets you know it hasn't forgiven you. But there's no time to wallow. A neighbor shouts something about entertainment, and suddenly the whole insula is buzzing. Someone mentions the amphitheatrum, and your ears perk up. The Colosseum. You limp your way outside, drawn like a moth to the bloody, dusty flame. The sun's barely risen, but the crowd has already begun to gather. Vendors push carts stacked with flatbread, roasted chickpeas, and steaming lentil stew. Children wriggle between legs, chasing each other with wooden swords. You snag a fig cake from a cheerful old woman who winks and says, "Eat it quick before you see too much." You follow the crowd through the streets toward the Colosseum, a massive ring of stone rising like a titan from the earth. It's breathtaking. Grand arches, weathered statues, and the sound of thousands of sandals slapping stone. Rome's greatest arena, built to awe and overwhelm. It does both. You squeeze through the entrance, your free ticket stamped with your seating level far, far up in the nosebleeds. You climb stone stairs steep enough to cause philosophical reflection. Finally, you find your seat among a mass of cheering, jeering spectators. The sun is in your eyes, the wind is full of dust, and the man next to you is eating pickled fish with his fingers. A herald blows a curved horn. The crowd quiets. Then the gates open. First come the Venetians' animal hunts. A man in leopard skin armor faces off against a lion released from a hidden trapdoor. Spears fly. The lion roars. The crowd gasps and then roars louder. You're gripping the bench, unsure whether to cheer or throw up your fig cake. Then, more animals. Ostriches chased by archers on foot. Bears goaded by men with torches. Even an elephant that refuses to cooperate, simply standing still and flapping its ears. The crowd boos. The elephant wins hearts. You sit stunned. This isn't theater. It's pageantry soaked in adrenaline. Historians still argue whether the masses truly loved these spectacles or just feared missing them. Either way, the noise is thunderous. A brief intermission allows you to stretch your aching legs. A vendor shouts fig wine, cold fig wine, and you give in. It's sweet, sticky, and a little fermented, but in a good, slightly dangerous way. Now the gladiators. Two armored men step into the arena, shining in the sun, faces unreadable behind their helmets. One holds a short sword and curved shield. The other carries a trident and net. They circle. The crowd chants. You've seen movies. You expect slow motion moves and noble speeches. But this, it's fast, brutal. The net flies. The sword parries. The trident pierces skin. One man stumbles, bleeding, and the crowd screams, not in horror, but in glee. The fight ends with one man on his knees, raising two fingers, a plea for mercy. The victor looks up to the emperor's box. A pause, a gesture, thumb sideways. Down, the crowd howls. The man falls. You sit frozen, fig wine forgotten. This is entertainment. A woman beside you claps daintily. Very skilled, she says. That was a Thracian style. Lovely footwork. You nod numbly. Somewhere deep inside, your modern soul curls up into a ball. But you're not alone. Across the arena, you spot a group of philosophers, robes, scrolls, thoughtful beards watching in silence. One mutters, Panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Keep the people fed and entertained, and they won't ask questions. Smart guy. Probably unpopular at parties. A chariot race follows fast, dusty, thrilling. Horses scream down the track as drivers whip and jostle. One crashes spectacularly, wood splinters flying. The crowd leaps to its feet. You wince. Hours pass. The sun scorches your shoulders. The air smells of sweat, iron, roasted meat, and just a hint of tragedy. As the final trumpet blares and the gates close, the crowd begins to file out, buzzing with excitement, placing bets on tomorrow's contests. You walk out slowly, the cheers still echoing in your ears. You glance back at the massive arena. It's impressive. Architectural genius. Cultural centerpiece. Monument to both pride and pain. You think of the fighters, the animals, the roar of the mob. You think of your fig cake, now a forgotten memory. And as you limp back toward the city center, your toe flaring in protest, you realize something. You might be too soft for this place. The sun has dipped behind the rooftops, casting long, golden shadows across the city. You'd like to believe the worst of the day is behind you. But then you arrive at your insula, your home, sweet home, a Roman tenement. Your building stands about 5 stories high, built hastily of brick and wood, and leaning slightly as if it's too tired to remain upright. It's one of hundreds like it, crammed together, stacked tall to accommodate Rome's overflowing population. From the outside, it resembles a game of architectural Jenga that's been losing for a while. You enter through a narrow, creaking doorway. Immediately, the air grows warm and thick. There's no central ventilation here, no chimney, no insulation, just body heat, boiling pots, and oil lamps fighting over the remaining oxygen. A cat darts past your feet, followed by a cloud of smoke and someone cursing about burnt lentils. You trudge up a wooden staircase, clutching the splintery handrail like your life depends on it. It probably does. These staircases are notorious. Historians still argue whether more Romans died from falling off their own balconies than in actual battles. Either way, you take each step with the reverence of a tightrope walker. You reach your floor, third, maybe fourth. You've lost count and push open the door to your one-room apartment. It's about the size of a modern garden shed. One narrow window, a rough cot, a stool, and a shelf holding your entire net worth. One cup, two tunics, and the mysterious mouse tail from earlier. Your neighbor is already home, not in your room, though the walls are so thin it barely matters. Every sound carries. You hear her mumbling to herself, then cackling, then singing something off-key about Jupiter's sandals. You sigh. It's going to be a loud night. You collapse onto your cot. The straw mattress puffs up a little cloud of dust and mystery. It creaks ominously. You lay back and stare at the ceiling, where a suspicious damp spot has started to resemble the face of a disapproving senator. You hope the roof holds. Below you, someone starts arguing. Loudly, pots bang, a dog barks, a baby wails, and in the distance, someone's playing a pan flute like their life depends on it, and honestly, it might. You realize something else. There's no bathroom. If nature calls in the middle of the night, it's a trek down those creaking stairs and out to the shared latrine. Or, for some, a clay pot under the bed and a guilty toss out the window in the morning. The phrase, "watch your head," wasn't just advice, it was survival. You light your oil lamp and fumble around for your dinner. A stale roll, some lentils you bought earlier, and an olive that may or may not be past its prime. You eat slowly, chewing each bite like it might be your last. Because in this place, it could be. Not because of danger, but because everything is exhausting. A sudden crash from upstairs jerks you alert. Someone dropped a pot, or a person, hard to tell. You wait for yelling. It comes, then stops, then resumes. Life in an insula is one long, shared experience. There is no such thing as a secret. You glance out your tiny window at the stars. They're dim, blurred by the smoke curling from cooking fires and torch smoke. Rome never really sleeps. It just mumbles into the night. You think about your old life, electricity, hot showers, walls that keep out noise, the ability to go to the bathroom without a logistics plan. Here, you've got none of that. But you do have character. You try to console yourself with that thought as a rat scampers along the far wall. You make eye contact. He nods. You nod back. A gentleman's agreement. You blow out your lamp, roll onto your side, and try not to think about the ceiling beam above your head that cracked slightly when you came in. Or the baby now screaming downstairs, or the flute, which has shifted keys and gained a tambourine. Rome is eternal, yes, but rest, that's negotiable. And as you finally begin to drift off, your stomach grumbles again. The fig cake didn't last. Tomorrow, you promise yourself, you'll find a quieter place. Maybe something with a door that latches. Maybe a roof with fewer surprises. But tonight, You'll take what you can get: a hard bed, shared walls, and the soft chorus of a city snoring, arguing, and surviving. You wake up groggy, eyes crusted, limbs stiff, brain wrapped in a toga of confusion. It's still dark, but the city's already murmuring, pots clanking, chickens squawking, someone singing what sounds like a love song to their goat. You groan, stretch, and sit up. Today, you're determined to understand how Romans find peace in this chaos, how they cope, how they make sense of everything. You've seen the bread, the baths, the amphory, but what about the soul of the place? You decide to explore Rome's spiritual side. Stepping into your sandals, both of which are mysteriously damp, you shuffle toward the household shrine, or lararium, tucked in the corner of your insula's entry hall. It's a tiny altar, barely knee-high, with figurines of the Lares, household guardian spirits, standing like stern little action figures. A bowl of old grain and a slightly melted candle sit before them. Your neighbor nods at you and murmurs a greeting, then offers a pinch of salt to the spirits. You do the same, just in case. The Romans didn't play around with household blessings, offend the Lares, and next thing you know, your wall collapses or your donkey runs away. Down the street, a man tosses a coin into a roadside shrine for Mercury. He touches the statue's feet, mutters a prayer about safe travel, then spits on the ground twice for luck. You do not ask questions. You just nod and walk on. Temples rise around you, grand and gleaming. The Temple of Jupiter looms with its thick columns and crackling incense. You pass the Temple of Vesta, where a group of white-robed Vestal virgins tend the sacred flame. It's said, if the fire ever goes out, Rome will fall. So, no pressure. You peek inside a smaller temple where a priest waves a smoking bundle of herbs while chanting in a rhythmic drone. The scent is somewhere between pine and old socks, but it works. The air feels heavier. People kneel, cross themselves, not Christian style, but with gestures tracing the forehead and chest. Romans didn't follow one religion. They followed all of them. Official gods like Mars and Venus, imported gods from Egypt and Persia, household spirits, tree nymphs, ancestor ghosts. It's a spiritual buffet. A woman passes with a small terracotta statue of Isis cradled in her arms. She's on her way to a ritual. You follow, curious. You arrive at a modest courtyard where robed worshippers gather, whispering hymns in a language you don't understand. They light oil lamps and wave feathers in the air. One woman pours wine onto the ground, her eyes closed. It's solemn, strange, and oddly beautiful. Next, you visit an augur, a priest who reads omens. He sits under a fig tree, watching birds. Yes, birds. Romans believed the gods sent messages through bird movement. A crow caws, and the augur nods sagely. Fortune smiles upon new ventures today, he declares. You think of starting a bathhouse review scroll. Maybe not. Historians still argue whether augury was genuinely respected or just tolerated as a quaint tradition. Either way, No major Roman decision, war, building, marriage happened without bird input. So you squint upward, hoping for a wise pigeon. Back in the forum, you stumble into a man carrying a goat. "Sacrifice," he says casually. "My cousin's got a rash." He smiles. The goat does not. You pause at a stall selling charms. Bronze hands for luck, tiny phalluses for fertility, miniature eyes to ward off envy. You buy one with a curled fish and hang it on your tunic. The vendor winks. That one's for courage or digestion. Depends on the day. You pass a funeral procession, slow and somber. Mourners wear dark togas and toss flowers onto the bier. Musicians play flutes in a wailing tone. Someone releases a dove. A priestess anoints the air with oil and murmurs a final prayer. The body is carted away for cremation. It's quiet, sacred. Then a child sneezes, and someone claps to ward off evil spirits. As the day stretches, you begin to understand. Roman spirituality is less about belief and more about balance. Every action must be in harmony with the gods, the ancestors, the universe. Forget to light a candle. That's how earthquakes happen. Step on a crack. Hope you brought a sacrificial chicken. Even your evening meal requires a nod to divine forces. Bread broken with the right hand. A drop of wine poured to the floor before the first sip. A whispered Bene Fortunam before you bite into your dried fig. You return home as twilight softens the rooftops. Smoke rises from chimneys, and the Larrys in your hallway seem to glow in the lamp's flicker. You bow your head briefly, not because you believe they're watching, but because, well, what if they are? You wake to the soft sound of humming. Not birds, not panpipes. Human humming, low and rhythmic. You peek out your tiny window and spot a couple walking hand in hand down the lane, sharing a piece of flatbread and smiling like the world isn't falling apart around them. Ah, Roman romance. You've seen the temples, the togas, the chaos, the colosseums. But what about love? Or, at least, whatever version of love managed to exist in a city where bathing was optional and public toilets were communal. You decide to explore. Down in the forum, a young man is practicing lines from Ovid's Ars Amatoria, Rome's premier guide to flirting, written by a poet who was later exiled, possibly for teaching too well. "Let your eyes speak before your tongue," the boy mutters, then trips over his own sandals while trying to wink at a girl selling figs. She throws a fig at him. Direct hit. You learn quickly that Roman romance isn't quite candlelight and roses. It's often transactional. Marriages are arranged, dowries are negotiated, and social rank takes priority over feelings. If you're a young woman, your wedding might be planned before you grow your first adult tooth. If you're a man, you're expected to marry not for love, but for legacy. Still, love exists. Somewhere, you pass a couple arguing fiercely, hands flailing, faces red. A moment later, they're holding hands again and laughing like lunatics. Ah, timeless. You meet a friend of your neighbor Lucia, who invites you for wine and olives. She's sharp-eyed, sharp-tongued, and clearly amused by your toga struggles. Over a plate of fried chickpeas, she explains the rules of courtship. Don't come empty-handed, don't smell like sheep, and never compare someone's beauty to Venus unless you want them to laugh in your face. You try flirting with a compliment about her sandals. She raises an eyebrow. They were my dead aunts. You panic, pivot, and ask about her favorite god. She smiles. Bacchus, he doesn't judge. The truth is, Roman dating is less about roses and more about rhythm. Glances in the forum, chance meetings at the baths, scribbled poems on marble walls. Yes, graffiti love poems were real. You spot one later, etched into a tavern. I don't care what you think, I love Secundus, and I always will. Romantic, petty, timeless. Historians still argue whether Roman women had true romantic agency, or if affection was just a socially sanctioned illusion. But as Lucia lectures a man who cut in front of her in the bread line, you suspect some women made their own rules. You walk past the Temple of Venus, where offerings of flowers and honey cakes are placed beneath marble statues. Inside, a woman whispers a prayer for a faithful husband. Her friend follows with a louder one for a richer one. Elsewhere, you hear stories. One about a senator who fell in love with a flute player and gave up his title to marry her. Another about a woman who faked her death to escape an arranged marriage and ended up running a theater troupe in Gaul. Honestly, you root for her. Later, you see a wedding procession, bright tunics, chanting, flower petals tossed like confetti. The bride wears a flame-colored veil and sandals tied with wool, stepping over the threshold as guests clap. Her face is calm. His is terrified. You can't tell if they're in love or just trying not to trip. You pass a widow tending her late husband's tomb, speaking softly about the weather, about her aching back, about how their fig tree finally bloomed again. She leaves a flower and a crust of bread. Your throat catches. That night, you return to your insula and find Lucia waiting with a jug of wine and a smirk. You owe me a rematch, she says, tossing you a knucklebone for dice. You play by lamplight, sipping, laughing, shoulders touching just slightly. It's not grand or poetic. There's no harp in the background, but it's something. As you lie in bed later, staring at the ceiling, you wonder if this is how love works here, not as a sudden spark, but as a stubborn ember that survives chaos, heat, and a lot of fermented fish sauce. Not perfect, not always fair, but sometimes, just sometimes real. Morning comes again, not gently, but with a pounding at your door. You jolt upright, knocking over your clay cup, which shatters instantly. Outside, a man in bronze armor is shouting your name. He holds a scroll. You open the door, bleary-eyed, and he announces, flatly, "You've been drafted." Your brain tries to catch up. Drafted. Into what? Theater troupe. Olive oil sales. No, he taps his spear against the step. Legionary service. Report at dawn. Tomorrow. And just like that, You're no longer a citizen with back pain and bread crumbs in your tunic. You're a soldier now. Congratulations. Rome's army doesn't wait for permission. You're conscripted, not consulted. And since you're not wealthy enough to buy your way out, and definitely not influential enough to dodge paperwork, you get to serve the empire. With honor and blisters, you report to the castrum, or training camp, with dozens of equally bewildered men. Some look eager. Most look like they thought this week was going to involve figs, not phalanx formations. The commanding officer greets you with a bark. Strip, he yells, handing you a standard-issue tunic and telling you to ditch everything else. You do so quickly, while a man behind you mumbles a prayer to Mars and tries to hide his nervous hiccups. They shave your head, not artistically, just shaved. A Roman soldier, apparently, shouldn't have anything an enemy could grab, including pride. Then comes the gear. You're given a scutum, a large rectangular shield that weighs as much as your optimism, and a gladius, a short sword that feels, in your hands, more like a butter knife attached to a brick. Then the training begins. You run, and run, and then run more, this time with full armor, which includes metal plates, a heavy helmet, and sandals reinforced with nails. You quickly realize why Roman roads were so important. You're running all of them. You learn to march in formation, to shout in Latin, to hold your shield just so. You mess up. You get yelled at. You trip. You get yelled at. A man to your left vomits mid-drill. The centurion doesn't flinch. Welcome to the 12th Legion, someone mutters. You spend the evening in a tent with 8 other men, eating a meal of barley porridge and tough goat jerky. It's warm, it's silent, and it tastes faintly of leather and salt. Your bunkmate is a veteran named Publius. He has no teeth and a collection of scars like a museum exhibit. He tells you stories about Gaul, about marching through snow, about a guy who lost a toe, but still beat his commander at dice. You laugh, then realize he's not joking. He teaches you how to wrap your feet to avoid blisters, how to sleep with one eye open, and most importantly, how to fake a limp to get out of latrine duty. The next morning, you're up before the sun. More drills, more shouting. You learn to build a camp, dig trenches, throw javelins, and construct a wall out of sticks, mud, and ambition. It's impressive. The Roman army is less a fighting force and more a mobile city made of sweat and scheduling. Historians still debate whether Roman discipline bordered on the sadistic or was just incredibly efficient. Either way, you haven't had a moment to sit since sunrise. Eventually, you're marched to a mock battlefield. You line up, raise your shield, and wait for the signal. When it comes, a blast of the curved cornu horn, you charge. Dust flies, shields clash. You swing your gladius and mostly hit air. The man across from you knocks your helmet sideways. Publius yells, something encouraging that sounds like "Don't die, rookie." You survive. Barely. That night, around a flickering fire, the men laugh. One plays a reed flute. Someone roasts chestnuts, Publius falls asleep mid-sentence. You sit quietly, staring at the flames, thinking, this wasn't the plan. You were supposed to sample figs, visit temples, maybe fall in love with a sarcastic olive vendor. Not march across continents with a sword too short and sandals too loose. But here you are, a legionary, a cog in the mighty machine of empire. You lay back on your rolled cloak, using your helmet as a pillow, and look up at the stars. They look the same. Somewhere beyond this camp, Rome is glowing with torches and noise. But here it's still, for once. And despite your sore legs, your aching arms, and the goat jerky repeating on you, you're proud. Terrified, but proud. You make it back to the city by some miracle, or more accurately, by sheer Roman endurance and a generous helping of calloused feet, the marching, the shouting, the goat jerky. It all fades behind you as the silhouette of Rome reappears on the horizon. Its smoky skyline and ancient arches welcoming you like a mother who doesn't quite approve of your choices. You shuffle past the city gates, a little sunburned, a little bow-legged, and completely exhausted. Your first stop, water. Not the fancy aqueduct kind. Mind you, that's for the upper floors and the upper classes. You kneel at the nearest public fountain, splash your face, and drink deeply, trying not to think about the number of other faces that have done the exact same thing. The water tastes metallic, faintly chalky, and utterly divine. Next stop, bread. You trade a dull bronze coin for a loaf from a woman with biceps that could crush amphory. It's warm, hard, possibly sentient, but delicious. You find a quiet wall to lean on, a rare and treasured moment of stillness in the eternal city. You chew, you breathe, you listen. Around you, the sounds of Rome carry on like a familiar lullaby. The creak of a cart, the sing-song calls of market vendors, the wailing argument of a married couple 3 stories up, the unmistakable splash of someone emptying a chamber pot a bit too casually. You survived. You, with your blisters, your patched tunic, and your growing distaste for fermented fish sauce, have lasted a full day in ancient Rome. Barely. You glance around at the city, its grandeur and grime, its towering temples and toppling tenements. Rome is glorious. Rome is ruthless. It does not slow down for anyone, not senators, not slaves, and certainly not you. You head back toward your insula, dragging your feet past a group of philosophers arguing about fate, justice, and whether soup counts as a beverage. You pass a girl dancing with a tambourine, a pickpocket pretending to be a street performer, and a pair of drunk men locked in a heated debate about who has the better sandals. The truth settles in gently. You're not built for this, not for sponge sticks, not for mystery stew, not for collapsing staircases, or toga origami, or lions before lunch. And yet, there's something magnetic here, something oddly comforting in the chaos. Rome doesn't coddle you, it crushes you into shape. It scrapes away comfort until all that's left is grit, humor, and a surprising tolerance for goats in public places. Back in your room, You collapse onto your straw-stuffed mattress, breathing in the smell of smoke, oil, and vague dampness. Your ceiling beam hasn't fallen yet. Your neighbor is already asleep, snoring in perfect sync with a passing flute outside. You think of the Larrys, the bread crumbs left as thanks, the quiet blink of oil lamps, of Lucia, the woman who beat you at dice and drank you under the table, of Publius, snoring somewhere under the stars with a dagger under his pillow, and a poem about soup somewhere in his soul. You close your eyes. You made it. But let's be honest, you wouldn't last another day. And now, as the sounds of Rome fade into memory, soft sandals on stone, the crackle of torchlight, distant laughter echoing through alleyways, let yourself drift away. You've marched through the streets of the greatest empire in history, felt the weight of a gladius, the sting of fig wine, the scratch of coarse wool. You've faced down dormice on silver platters, bird-based prophecies, and the all-too-human rhythm of a city that never truly sleeps. Yes, it was chaotic. Yes, it was unwashed, unfiltered, and occasionally deeply confusing. But it was also alive, pulsing with purpose, singing with stories, humming with history. And you walked those roads. For a day, you were one of them, a citizen, a soldier, a stumbler in sandals. And even if you wouldn't last long, you lasted long enough. So let your breath slow. Let your mind wander past the columns and the courtyards. Let the stars over the forum guide you home. There's no need for armor now. No need for sandals or salves or sticky honey fingers. Just peace, just sleep, just the soft hush of eternity brushing over marble and moss. Rome rests, and so do you.